All right, let's play utilitarian for a moment. Let's assume that our goal is to create the greatest good for the greatest number. We want to increase as much as possible the total amount of happiness, contentment, satisfaction, pleasure that exists in the world, and we want to decrease as much as possible the amount of pain and suffering and displeasure that exists in the world. And one possible tool that we have in our toolbox right now is gene therapy. Are there ways to use it to achieve the goal of creating the greatest good for the greatest number? Let's say we could use gene therapy, for example, to ensure that eventually every single child that comes into the world healthy. Every baby is born healthy. We're no longer going to have children that are born with genetic anomalies that cause them harm, cause them suffering. We're no longer going to have children born with mental, cognitive, or physical disabilities. They're all going to be born healthy. We're going to use gene therapy as a way of eliminating hereditary diseases. So things that we can inherit that causes suffering, that causes harm, we're going to eliminate those. And we're also going to manipulate our genes so that people are living longer lives. So people are living longer lives, and those longer lives are healthier lives, which means that people are going to have opportunities to experience greater degrees of contentment, satisfaction, happiness, and pleasure than they would have otherwise, because they're going to be healthier and they're going to be living longer lives with those kinds of experiences in them. Should we use gene therapy to attain these benefits? Or do they come with costs that outweigh the benefits? What if we could use gene therapy not just to create healthier individual people, but to create a better world? What if, for example, we could use gene therapy to eventually make it so that there exists only one skin color, thereby eliminating any conceivable basis for having arbitrary prejudices against groups of people based on their skin color? We'd all have the same skin color, and we'd therefore eliminate those kinds of prejudices. What if we could standardize heights so that we didn't have it be the case that people born with greater than normal human height have advantages and opportunities that those of us born at a normal height don't have? For example, being a professional basketball player. If you have the advantage of having an unusually high height, well, you've got advantages over us that don't have that. So if we could standardize heights, then maybe that's one of the advantages that some have over others that we could eliminate and kind of level that playing field a little bit. What if we could do this? What if we could manipulate the genes of the human race to eliminate any genetic predisposition towards deviancy and thereby reduce crime? Right? So now we've got a healthier population that's no longer contending with arbitrary prejudices related to skin color, and they're living in a safer world where we're no longer spending as much money on fighting crime, on treating diseases, on raising people out of dysfunction and into normal human health. We're going to have a more productive workforce that probably works more efficiently, more effectively, and they're certainly going to be able to work for longer. What if we could make it so through gene therapy, we could improve childbearing by not having anyone bear children at all? What if we could have children be born in test tubes only? Now, one of the things that you may be thinking as I roll out these various dystopian, utopian, however you perceive them, scenarios is that we've crossed some line here. Some of this doesn't feel natural, right? It was one thing when we're talking about using gene therapy as a way of manipulating someone's genes in order to eliminate dysfunction and disability and to raise them up out of that disabled status into the range of normal human health. And maybe we thought like, yeah, initially kind of felt like that playing God type stuff. It feels sort of unnatural. It feels like we're taking control of nature. But, maybe I got to start thinking about this differently. I got to start thinking about gene therapy more like I think about other existing medical technologies that cures dysfunction and disability. I got to start thinking about more like I think about vaccines. It kind of seems that way. But now we seem to have crossed a line, because now we're not talking about eliminating dysfunction or giving people protections against future possible dysfunctions. Now what we're doing is we're manipulating genes in order to construct a particular kind of world, a particular kind of culture that's based on a certain set of values. And that doesn't seem natural. That doesn't seem how human cultures and human societies naturally develop over time? This is starting to feel a little funky. And if you have some of those thoughts or questions, I'd ask you to think about what the value of natural is. We tend to think of natural as somehow inherently good, right? So you remember during the pandemic, there was lots of argument about, well, what kind of immunity is best? And there were some saying, well, I think natural immunity is better than any immunity you're going to get from a vaccine, and vice versa. And you can think about this modifier, natural, in a variety of different ways. And usually it has a positive connotation to it, right? Like natural food, natural childbirth, and so forth, natural pregnancy as opposed to like test tube pregnancy or IVF. And if we have these kinds of predilections towards things that are natural, we might ask ourselves why, whether or not those preferences are justifiable, and where we cross a line in a technological line where we've gone so far from what's natural that we're in kind of funky territory. And I mentioned in the last slide this idea of having childbearing not occurring the way that it usually does, but occurring in some more synthetic sort of laboratory environment. And this is an idea that an author named Jamie Metz fleshes out in his book, Hacking Darwin. And one of the things he says here, and I'll let you decide whether this is utopian or dystopian, he says, I certainly think that 40 or 50 years from now, conceiving children in a lab will be the normal way that people in advanced countries conceive their children. And I certainly see ourselves moving in a direction where conception through sex will come to be seen as natural, yet dangerous. Kind of equivalent to not vaccinating your kids today is seen as something that's very natural and yet taking on an unnecessary risk. So here's the idea that we might be able to get so good at manipulating genes, at manipulating life, that we can remove the process of fertilization and pregnancy out of the human body and into the laboratory. And Metz's prediction is that because this would likely grant a lot more control over the development of the fetus, that this will become seen as the safe way of conceiving children. This will become seen as the responsible way to conceive children, and that people who choose to do it old school are going to be seen as not just doing something that's hippie natural. They're going to be seen as like taking a risk. It's like, wow, man, it's like you're actually going to get pregnant through sex and then carry that child in your body for 9 months and all of the risks that attend to that, rather than just doing what's normal and have your child be fertilized or conceived and gestating in a laboratory. Because this is the direction that Metz thinks that gene therapy is going. And so you would have to decide for yourself, does this cross a line for me? Is this a line I'm not willing to cross? Or if this comes to be the case, would I be ethically obligated to support conceiving and gestating children in this way?